What's going on, YouTube? Today I want to talk about how I personally got into FPV with the intent of making a future video of how you should get into FPV, because let me tell you right now, you shouldn't do what I did. Let's get into it. Alright, so how did I get started in this? Where did my journey begin? Well, I've kind of been into the RC type of thing for quite a long time. When I was a kid, I would fly airplanes with my dad, like a lot of people did. And that was really fun. That's always been one of my favorite things to do. It wasn't until relatively recently that I got into FPV at all, much less the drones. The first camera that I put on anything flying was actually on I think it was a E-Flight Timber, the bush plane one, the huge wheels. I put a camera on that and I got a little screen for it. And that was awesome. That was so fun. I had never done anything like that before. And I knew right then and there that this was going to be a major expense for me in the future. And I was right. For the people out there that are wondering if having a background in the RC planes helps you in any way with drones, with FPV, with that type of control, I would say the actual control does, because it's kind of the same motions and the same stick movements. So in that aspect, it does. But one thing I've noticed that's really hindered me in my progress personally is in airplanes, if you crash, it's pretty much catastrophic because they're usually made of foam or balsa wood. They're not durable. You're not going to find a plane made of carbon fiber like you will with a drone, for example. So because of that, you fly a lot more conservatively, or at least I did. A lot of people do. And I call it the oh f*** reflexes. So in a plane, if you're about to hit something, you do oh f*** and you pull up, or you turn away, or you climb out of it, or whatever. With a drone, sometimes you want to take that risk to perfect a trick, or say you're in a really cool freestyle line or a really good race and you want to push it to the max. The plain background of oh f***, I'm going to crash, that does not translate well here. You do kind of have to work to break yourself of that if you really want to get better with drones. Even still, I'll notice if I'm in a freestyle line, I'm doing rolls and flips and whatnot. If I see that I'm coming up to a gap and I'm not gonna make it, I still will have the really twitchy, like, oh f***, I'm gonna hit this shit, and try to pull out of it. Sometimes that's not good. It's never good to crash, of course, but sometimes you just gotta f***ing send it, and that's how you get better. So after my FPV airplane phase, I decided I should give the drone thing a try. So I went to my local hobby shop and I picked up what they call a tiny whoop. The particular one I got, I think, was a Blade Inductrix. I think that was the model. But that was so fun. I was hooked on the drones after that. The only thing about those is you can't really fly it outside because they get tossed around by the wind. The slightest breeze will just carry the thing away. You also can't do flips, rolls, what they call acro stunts. I don't know, for some reason they're tuned weird, and whenever you go upside down, it just freaks out. So there are limitations, but if you live in an area that's either too cold or too wet, or maybe in the summer it's too hot, that is an option to get you through the winter or the summer if you gotta fly FPV. So after I flew my little tiny whoop around, I thought it was time to get into a bigger drone. I wanted to fly outside. I was tired of flying inside. I was tired of running into walls all the time and all that crap. So I just figured it was time. So instead of just buying one, because you've probably noticed at this point, I'm a cheap bastard. I like to do the minimum cost of shit possible. I like to do everything myself if I can. Most times it works out, but I don't know, sometimes it doesn't. So what I did was I downloaded a 3D printed design off Thingiverse and put it all together, put all the components together, and it wasn't designed great in my opinion. Everything was kind of exposed. The flight controller was just stick up out of nowhere. So was the camera, so were all the components. So if it hits anything, they're toast. Rip wires off or break the components. Not to mention the 3D printed stuff, super brittle. If you hit even a little twig and you're going faster than 0, it will explode into a million pieces. The material I was using for these 3D printed drones, it's called PLA. If you don't know what PLA is, it's a fairly strong but super brittle 3D printing filament. It's good for like large enclosure type stuff or limited use parts that have no impact requirements. But for something like a drone, where it's flying very fast and the collisions are very violent, it's not very good. I went through probably about 6 revisions of my 3D printed drone design before I finally called it quits and decided to upgrade to the carbon fiber. But one thing you do learn from designing and building your own 3D printed frames is why the pros design the frames the way they do. One thing though that I do like about my designs that I don't see on any of the current, like the Lumeniers and those bigger companies that make the carbon fiber frames, they don't leave you any space to build the damn thing. It drives me insane. You have a tiny little frame like this, and this one's actually pretty big too. The shit is just mashed in here. It's so irritating. The wire routing is a nightmare all the time. There's always something getting pinched. It's just a fucking nightmare to put together, and especially to repair if you break it, and you will break it. So please, if anyone from those companies is watching this, please make a drone that's a little bit bigger and easier to access. If you want to get people into this, people don't want to jam their fingers into tiny little places and work with shit that is impossible to work with. Give them a bigger build area. Give them more space to work with. If they want to buy something faster, more maneuverable, whatever, they can buy that. Those still exist. But they're, at least to my knowledge, there's nothing out there that really fits that bill. I think that's a gap that needs to be addressed. So if anyone's listening, just please take that into consideration. It drives me f***ing insane. Another major area that I had problems in was the control link area. I personally use FrSky, FreeSky, whatever. A lot of people use Spectrum. That's actually what I started on. I only switched to FrSky when I got into the 3D printed stuff, I think. And all of that is 2.4 gigahertz. What a lot of people use is, there's one called Crossfire or the FrSky R9M. That's what I use now. It's a different frequency that's better for long range and like behind obstacles and that kind of thing. So I had a lot of issues when I was first starting with signal loss. I think that was probably the biggest continual issue that I faced. And it was super irritating. There's really nothing you can do at that point. You spend all this time building this quad, working up the courage to fly it, then you go out, it drops out of the sky like a brick. That's when I finally learned to get a better control link. I'm not saying that R9M is great, but it's better than the standard FrSky 2.4 gigahertz radio system. So another thing I want to touch on is the video setup that I've been doing for these past couple of years. Now, what I first started with was a little 5-inch screen that came with the tiny whoop that I had. And honestly, I stuck with that way too long. I used that with most of my 3D printed stuff, and I only got this monitor, you know, pretty recently, pretty long after that. So I do have goggles now, but I think I just took way too long to get to that level. And something I've noticed is the type of flying I do is always ahead of the gear that I have. I have a bad habit of using really shitty stuff for way too long and the skill is above the gear at that point. So that's the way I did it. I wouldn't do that again. I think that was a bad idea. I think it hindered me in some aspects, and I think it was a waste of money. So just keep that in mind with the video aspect of things. I think an aspect of FPV that's commonly overlooked or just not really thought about is the action camera and the editing and releasing cinematic or freestyle or the one-take videos that some people do. I think that's overlooked sometimes because that is an entirely different skill altogether. When I came into this, I didn't know anything, nothing about cameras, about video editing. I'd never touched a video in my life. I wanted to make the cinematic, the freestyle, the cool music videos that you see pilots like Ladrib, Alex Vanover, Mamba FPV, all those Rotor Riot guys. Their content is just awesome, and that's the thing that I wanted to do. But that aspect is overlooked, and it really shouldn't be, because that is part of this culture, this community. In my opinion, that's the coolest part of it. That's what makes this whole thing appealing, at least to me. Now, I got into that part of it maybe about a year into it, and I started with a company called RunCam. Now, I personally have had terrible experience with them. I'm not saying that all of their products are bad, and I'm not saying that even the products that I use, I'm not saying those are all bad, but I've had 2 products from them. Both have suffered the same fate. I won't say the exact models, I don't want to bury them or anything like that, but you go through a tiny crash, or in one of the cases, no crash at all, and it just doesn't turn on. Well, that turned out to be a battery contact issue. They're very poorly designed in my opinion. But that's where I started. And again, not saying I would recommend that. I would probably just go the GoPro route from day one. And I have a Hero 8 now, which is incredible. It is extremely strong. It can take a hell of a beating. It's really incredible. I would go that route if I had to do it again. Okay, so where am I at now? Well, I finally got a second quad, like maybe a month ago at this point. Again, I waited way too long to do this. As much as I've been into this hobby for 2 years now, most of the people I know that have been doing it that long, they've got 5, 6, 7 quads. I only have 2 right now. I have this problem of my shit lagging behind what I'm trying to do, my skill level, or whatever type of flying I'm doing. If you're going to get into this, it's much easier to have at least 2 quads, because you will break your shit, 100%. When that happens, if you only have 1 quad, you might be screwed until you fix that. Well, that might be a day, you might have to wait a week if you're ordering parts. Makes it so much easier if you have more than 1 quad. So at least 1 can be in the sky at all times. And if you want to get better, you gotta practice. You can't practice if your quads are not flying. So right now, my second quad is this guy here, the Nazgul, I don't know how you say that, the XL5. It's just another analog setup. Again, lagging behind on the gear. I do want to get into the DJI, but I can't justify that price tag right now. That's just insane. Hopefully soon, but as you can see with me, this is a common theme. I just stick with the same shit for so long. I need to break that habit at some point here. Anyways, got my second quad here. It's already been a lifesaver, and I've lately been trying to fly every day for at least an hour, whether it's on the simulator, if it's raining outside, or actual in real life flying, which obviously is the best. I'm kind of just at the point where I'm trying to just grind and get better, honestly. I'll watch videos on YouTube for different trick ideas or different freestyle ideas. I love watching the videos where they have an awesome song matched up perfectly to a beautiful video, some nice color grading in there. I love that kind of thing. So if you're still watching, I appreciate you. I have rambled on for way too long about way too many topics. I could make many videos off any one of these topics. I have so many thoughts and so many opinions on so many different things. So shout out to you if you're still listening. Really appreciate it. In the future, I want to make a video about how you should get into FPV, because as you can see, my story is long, it's winding, it's unnecessarily complicated at times. It is my mission to help you get into this with less money and less pain than it took me to get where I'm at. So if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like down below, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't. Really appreciate it. See you on the next one.